There's a habit you practice every single day that you would never describe as a weakness. It doesn't look like self-sabotage. It doesn't show up as chaos, breakdowns, or obvious dysfunction. In fact, if someone asks you how you're doing, you'd probably say you're fine, busy, tired, managing, but fine. And that's exactly why this habit is so dangerous. Because it hides behind words like self-control, emotional maturity, and being strong. It convinces you that you've learned how to handle life, how to keep your emotions in check, how not to let things get to you the way they used to. On the surface, it looks like growth. But something subtle has been happening underneath. You've noticed it in quiet moments when there's no distraction to lean on. A dull flatness, a sense that your reactions are delayed or muted. That things which should move you, excitement, anger, sadness, even joy, barely register anymore, like they're happening behind glass. You're not numb in a dramatic way. You still care. You still function. You still feel something, but it's thinner, weaker, less embodied. Like the volume on your inner life has been slowly turned down, one small adjustment at a time. And because nothing is wrong enough, you keep going. You tell yourself this is just adulthood. That life naturally becomes less intense, less emotional, less vivid. That this dulling is the price of stability, responsibility, and not falling apart like you once did. But here's the truth no one says out loud. Emotional strength does not feel like emptiness. Resilience does not feel like disengagement. And calm does not feel like absence. What you're experiencing isn't strength, it's distance. Distance from your own internal signals. Distance from your reactions. Distance from the part of you that once felt more alive, more responsive, more present inside your own body. And the habit creating that distance is so normalized, so socially rewarded, that you've never questioned it. You learn to intercept emotion before it could fully arrive. Before it could disrupt your focus, your image, your momentum. You learn to stay ahead of it, to manage it, to silence it quickly so you could keep functioning. At first, this felt empowering. But over time, it quietly changed the relationship you have with yourself. You didn't lose your emotions. You lost your tolerance for feeling them. And that's the beginning of emotional weakness. Not collapse, not chaos, but a slow erosion of your capacity to stay present with what's happening inside you. By the time you notice something is missing, you can't quite name it. You just know you don't feel as solid as you should, as if something essential has been drained, not violently, but patiently. And this is where the story really begins. Because once you see this habit clearly, you can't unsee it. The habit itself doesn't announce itself as avoidance. It feels like control, like maturity, like you've finally learned how not to let your emotions run your life the way they once did. You tell yourself you've grown past reacting, past getting overwhelmed, past falling apart when something hits too close. What you've actually learned is how to intercept emotion before it fully lands. You do it automatically now. The moment disappointment shows up, you rationalize it. When anger rises, you swallow it. When sadness starts forming, you distract yourself. When excitement appears, you temper it so it won't hurt later. You don't even notice the sequence anymore. It happens faster than conscious thought. And from the outside, this looks impressive. You stay composed when others unravel. You keep functioning when things get heavy. You don't burden people with your inner world, and you pride yourself on being the one who can handle it. You're reliable, stable, low drama. That's why this habit gets rewarded. People trust you. They lean on you. They see you as grounded, reasonable, emotionally intelligent. And slowly, you begin to associate emotional suppression with competence, strength, and safety. But here's the part that never gets explained. Emotional strength is not the ability to shut feelings down. It's the ability to stay present inside them without losing yourself. What you've been practicing isn't strength, it's preemptive withdrawal. You leave your inner experience before it has a chance to move through you, because somewhere along the line, staying with it felt too risky, too destabilizing, or too costly. And every time you do that, your nervous system learns something very specific. It learns that emotions are interruptions, that they should be managed quickly. That contact with them is something to avoid rather than something to tolerate and metabolize. Over time, this rewires your baseline. You don't become calmer, you become flatter. Your reactions soften, but so does your vitality. You stop feeling overwhelmed, but you also stop feeling fully engaged. Life becomes easier to manage, but harder to inhabit. And because this shift happens gradually, you don't connect the dots. You think you're doing better. You think you've stabilized. You think you've outgrown sensitivity. But what's actually happening is more subtle and more concerning. You're trading emotional depth for emotional predictability. And that trade always feels smart in the moment, until you realize how much of yourself you've quietly stepped away from. Here's the part that almost no one connects until it's already happened. Real emotional strength is built through capacity, through staying present with discomfort long enough to discover that it doesn't destroy you, that you can feel something fully, frustration, grief, fear, disappointment, and remain intact. But capacity is not built through avoidance. When you consistently step away from emotions instead of staying with them, you never develop endurance. So the irony is brutal. The more you try to protect yourself from emotional discomfort, the less capable you become of handling it. That's why smaller things start to feel heavier than they should. A minor setback drains you for days. A bit of criticism lingers longer than it used to. Uncertainty feels exhausting instead of stimulating. Not because life has become objectively harder, but because your tolerance has quietly shrunk. You haven't lost emotional strength in one dramatic moment. You've lost it the same way muscles weaken when they aren't used, slowly, invisibly, without pain at first. And numbness sneaks in under the guise of stability. You don't feel devastated. You just feel less motivated, less connected, less engaged. Life turns into something you manage rather than something you participate in. That's why people reach a point where they say, genuinely confused, "I don't know what's wrong with me. Nothing is terrible. I just feel weak." What they're really feeling is undertrained. You didn't wake up one day and decide to disconnect from your emotions. You learned this habit because at some point, feeling openly wasn't safe. Maybe your emotions were dismissed or minimized. Maybe you were told you were too sensitive, too intense, too dramatic. Maybe your feelings overwhelmed you once, and no one helped you learn how to move through them without drowning. So you adapted. You learned that staying composed was safer than being honest. That thinking was safer than feeling. That productivity, logic, and self-control kept you functional when emotional openness felt risky or unsupported. And that adaptation worked. It helped you survive. It helped you stay in control. It helped you avoid situations where emotions might destabilize your life or your image. But survival strategies don't automatically evolve into growth strategies. What once protected you is now constraining you because the environment has changed, and you have too. The threat is no longer the emotion itself, but the disconnection it creates when you keep avoiding it. Avoiding emotion doesn't eliminate it. It stores it. And stored emotion doesn't disappear. It leaks out slowly in ways that feel confusing and hard to trace. Chronic fatigue, irritability, anxiety, emotional flatness, or a vague sense that you're not as solid as you should be. This is where the reframe happens. Emotional strength is not about control. It's about contact. It's the ability to stay present long enough for an emotion to complete its natural cycle, to rise, peak, and fall, without interrupting it with distraction, suppression, or overanalysis. An emotion is not a command. It doesn't require action. It requires presence. But when you've trained yourself to shut emotions down early, presence feels wrong, exposed, inefficient. Like you're doing something irresponsible by not immediately fixing or managing what you feel. So at first, allowing emotion feels destabilizing. You feel raw, less armored, less composed, like you've lost a layer of protection you relied on for years. But then something unexpected happens. The emotion passes, not because you forced it to, but because you stayed with it. And each time you do this, your nervous system learns a new lesson. I can feel this and remain intact. That's how real strength is built. Not by avoiding discomfort, but by discovering that discomfort is survivable. You don't become dramatic. You become steady. You don't lose control. You gain capacity. As you stop suppressing and start allowing, emotional power returns quietly. You don't suddenly feel euphoric or intense. What you feel is solid, present, grounded. You trust yourself more, not because life is easier, but because you know you can meet it honestly. Your reactions slow down, not from numbness, but from confidence. You're less afraid of feeling because you've learned that feelings move. They don't trap you unless you try to escape them. You begin to feel alive again in a grounded way. Not constantly stimulated, not overwhelmed, just engaged. And this is the paradox. The habit that made you emotionally weak was never about feeling too much. It was about not letting yourself feel enough. When you stop cutting yourself off from your inner experience, you don't become fragile. You become resilient. Because the strongest people are not the ones who feel the least. They're the ones who can feel deeply and stay standing. And once you rebuild that capacity, something settles inside you. Not hype, not motivation, just a quiet sense of strength that doesn't need to prove itself.